On the evening of December 18th, 2018, a domestic situation in Renton, Washington escalated into one of the most heartbreaking tragedies the city had witnessed. What began as a custody dispute between divorced parents ended with the death of 14-year-old Natalie Gulizia, shot by her own mother, Svetlana Borisovna Laurel. This is the complete account of that terrible night, reconstructed from police reports, witness statements, and investigative documents. Now, Svetlana was born October 29, 1966. Michael Gulizia was born May 30th, 1965. Both of them were in the midst of a contentious divorce and custody battle. The couple had 2 children together: Natalie, born January 19, 2004, and a 12-year-old son whose name is redacted. He was born in 2006. The custody situation had deteriorated significantly in the months leading up to the incident. According to Michael's statement to police, Svetlana had taken the children while he was on vacation in Florida. So he goes away and she snatches the children. Upon his return, he requested a modification of the parenting plan. Eventually, Michael was granted 100% custody of the children. Svetlana was to have only supervised custody and was required to seek counseling, which she refused to do so. There had been problems with Svetlana's lawyer, and their new trial date had been postponed until February 2019. This delay would prove fatal. Svetlana would not wait for the courts to decide. Now, piecing together Svetlana's background and the factors that may have contributed to this tragedy, she was a Russian immigrant who had come to the United States and built a career as an engineer at Boeing. By the way, do not fly on their planes. Next time you book a flight, make sure it's an Airbus plane. Go read up Boeing's practices and how many of the planes that they're building are unsafe. You'll see. Svetlana was described by some as very smart with multiple degrees. However, her professional life had been deteriorating in the years leading up to the murder. According to Robert Bolliker, Svetlana's last supervisor at Boeing, she had significant performance issues. She was described as being unreliable and not truthful, specifically in the way she managed her absences. When groups merged, she interviewed for a management position but was not selected. However, someone above Bolliker appointed her to the position anyway. She had performance issues, she was put on an action plan and failed to meet the plan. She was then dropped to the engineer position. Bolliker said Svetlana had a reputation regarding her performance, and he approached her and indicated that he would try to help her if she would let him. Initially, things went well, but then they deteriorated. He said she was sharp and picked up complicated things very quickly, but her unreliability impacted the entire group. She had difficulty time accounting for her days off. As soon as she got sick leave, she would exhaust it. In October 2017, it was decided there would be layoffs in the organization. Svetlana was the lowest ranking person in the group, so she knew her layoff would be coming. Bolliker again told her that he would try to assist her in possibly getting another job in the company. She didn't trust him. She sent him threatening emails. He described one of her emails where he questioned her about how she charged 2 hours of time that she did not work. She then replied saying, "Shame on you, Bob. Here you are picking on me. You're ruining my life. God will judge you." Bolliker took that email to HR. They then thought it did sound threatening. However, due to her impending separation from the company, they decided not to pursue anything. He received 3 or 4 such emails. He forwarded them to HR, but they thought, she's leaving anyway, why do anything? So her last day at Boeing was December 18, 2017, exactly 1 year before she would murder her daughter. Now, in the days and hours before the tragedy, there was a clear warning Svetlana was in crisis. On the very evening, December 18, 2018, a welfare check was requested through authorities for a female called Svetlana. The call text indicated that she had told a friend she had no reason to live and was upset about losing custody of her children. Officers were unable to locate her at her address. She then called a former classmate from college. During this call, she told him that she had amended her will to include him. When he expressed surprise and asked if they could discuss it the following day, due to the late hour and his illness, she said something in Russian. This translated as "I'm not going to be here," which was a clear indication of self-deletion intent. The friend was so troubled by this statement that after sitting for 20 to 30 minutes, he's the one that called 911 and was eventually transferred to Kent police. But by then, Svetlana was already executing her plan. She had been methodically preparing for that night. On October 12, 2018, she purchased a Sig Sauer P320 handgun from Pinto's gun store. However, there was a discrepancy on her driver's license that had been corrected before the paperwork could be completed. The gun was held for an extended period while she obtained a new license on October 4th. She finally picked up the gun on November 6th, and prior to purchasing the gun, she had taken a woman's gun safety class in the store. The class was held on the first Wednesday of every month, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., typically with 4 to 6 women in attendance. She would have taken either the September 5th or October 3rd class. Now, Diana Pinto, she's the one that owns and worked at the store, recalled that the business owner had spoken with Svetlana about the gun and tried to explain something to her. She informed him, "I'm an engineer, I understand." And in the days before the incident, Svetlana also purchased zip ties from Home Depot. A receipt for this purchase was later found in the master bedroom of her residence. On the day of the tragedy, Svetlana prepared carefully. She amended her will, naming 2 individuals as her power of attorney. She gathered items in bags. Witnesses would later report seeing 2 gift sacks and a grey athletic bag. Inside the bag, investigators would find a laptop computer. She also brought a cardboard Sig Sauer box, a taser, and the newly purchased handgun with the price tag still attached. She had zip ties and other items that she would need to carry out her plan. So, that evening, Michael and Natalie had gone downtown Seattle for one of Natalie's functions. Natalie was part of a charity club called TSB. Michael estimated they returned home around 8 p.m. Their 12-year-old son stayed at home. When Michael and Natalie arrived at their residence at 4701 Smithers Avenue, Michael noticed something unusual. The garage door leading from the attached garage into the house was locked. This was odd because he actually always left it open. He figured maybe my son is the one that locked it. Michael opened the door. Svetlana appeared before him, and without warning, she immediately tased Michael and commanded him to sit down. Upstairs, their son heard the commotion and called the police. Svetlana brandished the handgun and bound Michael's legs and wrists with zip ties. As she restrained him, she told Michael, "I'm gonna shoot you because you made my life miserable. Maybe you're just a stupid cow. Maybe that's why you're miserable, muppet." The 12-year-old boy was also zip-tied by his mother. At some point during this terrifying ordeal, Svetlana had a bunch of zip ties in her hand. Then, before shooting Michael, as she threatened, she made her way upstairs. So around 8:15 p.m., police were dispatched to a physical domestic altercation at the house. The reporting party was Natalie Gulizia, calling from inside the house. She advised dispatch that her mother and father were in an altercation. Her mother had a taser, her father was being threatened, there was no other weapons initially reported. The mother had zip-tied the 12-year-old brother. Natalie's mother was yelling in the background and there were sounds of a dog barking non-stop. Natalie explained that her parents were getting a divorce, there was a custody battle, it was difficult for dispatch to hear what was going on. Then at 8:19 p.m, the situation escalated. It was reported that the mother possibly had a BB gun. The father screamed the mother had a gun. Natalie was upstairs while the father and mother were downstairs. Then came the most chilling update. The mother had a gun to the father's head and said if anyone tries to come in, Dad's head is gone. Dispatch attempted to get involved parties out of the residence, but they were unable to comply. Sergeant Trader requested negotiators based on the mother's threat. Officers near the location were requested to form an entry team in case the situation changed during this evolving incident. The 911 call continued, providing real-time updates of the horror inside the house. There were sounds of the mother telling the father to stand up. Natalie advised that her mother had come upstairs, and she put her phone in her pocket to hide it. The mother was heard yelling, asking, "Where is the phone?" A loud noise was heard in the background, and dispatch just heard movement. The mother said, "You call 911," and said something about blowing someone's head off. There were sounds of someone saying, "Put your feet together." There were sounds of zip ties being put on. A loud noise was heard again that was possibly a door slamming. The amount of information coming through the call was so overwhelming that not all of it could be aired while officers approached the residence. Now, inside the house, upstairs in Natalie's bedroom, something terrible was happening. According to Michael's latest statement, the moment he regretted most was when Svetlana, with a bunch of zip ties in her hand, made her way upstairs before shooting him as she threatened. He heard one shot, then he saw Svetlana walk back downstairs. Upstairs in her bedroom, 14-year-old Natalie had been zip-tied at the ankles and wrists. Her hands were bound behind her back. She was shot once in the head, between her eyebrows at extremely close range. The gunshot wound had stippling around it. It was generally black in color and protruding up from swelling, all indicators of a contact or near contact shot. One spent shell casing was located in the room near the doorway. Natalie fell to the floor next to her bed and nightstand. Blood pooled on the carpet next to her head. Her cell phone remained in her rear pocket, and that was the phone she used to call 911. And after shooting Natalie, Svetlana walked back downstairs. Michael said that she recocked the gun, but it wouldn't fire. The weapon malfunctioned. Seizing this moment, he jumped up despite his restraints, slammed Svetlana into the wall, wrestled the gun away from her. This malfunction, this mechanical failure, saves Michael's life and his son's. Later examination of the gun would reveal why it failed. Officer Kirchhoff, who secured the weapon, noted it had been misfired. When he cleared it, he found that a round was already in the chamber, but failed to eject properly. The loose bullet recovered had a dent on the front, consistent with a type of malfunction, and there appeared to be a smudge on the rear of the bullet as well, which is common if another round is forced onto a round already in the chamber. By this point, officers were positioned outside the front door of the residence. Michael, after he slammed his ex-wife, exited the residence, hopping because his feet were bound with zip ties. He was holding what appeared to be a handgun by the very end of the pistol grip. He had difficulty moving because of his restraints. He quickly dropped the weapon onto the porch, made his way down the stairs listening to officers. His 12-year-old son was standing next to him, also with his feet and hands bowed. There was a female standing near the front entrance who hesitated and did not exit immediately. She was not bound and appeared uninjured. This was Svetlana. Officers ordered everyone to the ground. Michael was screaming, "I can't believe you shot my daughter," over and over again. His son was yelling at his mom had shot his sister Natalie in the head and that she was dead. All three individuals were detained. Michael and his son both had zip ties on them, and officers observed compression wounds to their ankles and wrists, consistent with having zip ties around these areas. Svetlana was placed in handcuffs, frisked for weapons, and placed in a patrol vehicle. During the search incident, officers found the following items on Svetlana. She had a Samsung cell phone in her left jacket pocket, 2 white socks cut down the middle in her left jacket pocket, a blue rubber glove in her right jacket pocket, and a key attached to a rubber band in her back pocket. The key appeared to be the house key that had been hanging on the back of the front door. Svetlana had taken it, presumably to ensure she could lock the door from the garage and trap the family inside. An entry team entered the residence to search for victims and ensured no other threats remained. So once the officers cleared the downstairs, they made their way upstairs. The room to the southwest had a female inside, Natalie Gulizia. Officers could see her feet were bound and she was bleeding profusely from the head. When officers entered the room, they immediately smelled gunpowder, indicating a gun had recently been fired. Natalie was lying on her right side next to her bed and nightstand, with an obvious gunshot wound to her head. There was blood and brain matter on her and on the carpet. She was not responsive and did not exhibit any signs of life. One shell casing was lying on the carpet just a few feet from Natalie, near the doorway to her bedroom. Officers requested that the only 2 medical personnel be escorted in and out of the residence to check the status of the victim in order to preserve the crime scene. At approximately 8:45 p.m., medics pronounced Natalie deceased. She was 14 years old. Now, multiple officers noted Svetlana's disturbing demeanor in the aftermath of taking her daughter's life. Officer Davis, who transported her from the scene to the police department, wrote in his report, "The only word Svetlana said to me was the confirmation of her name. The entire time they were with her, she showed no emotion at all. She was completely stone-faced. In fact, she seemed bored. This flat affect, this complete absence of emotion after murdering her child was noted by police officers and would be consistent throughout her interactions with law enforcement." A crime scene log was started and a perimeter was established around the residence. Michael and his son were secured in one vehicle and Svetlana in another, taking care that they would not encounter each other. Photographs were taken on scene. The zip ties on Michael and his son were photographed. The taser was collected. Officer Kirchhoff advised that the gun collected on the porch that Michael had dropped had misfired and he had cleared it. The gun still had a price tag on it, a grim reminder that it had been purchased specifically for this purpose. Now, inside the house, investigators found evidence of Svetlana's preparation. On the floor of the main living area was an athletic bag containing a laptop computer. Next to that bag was the cardboard Sig Sauer box. There were 2 gift sacks on the floor. On the sofa was a box that looked to be full of miscellaneous items and, oddly, a violin. Now, towards the back of the room, investigators saw loose zip ties on the ground. As they circled around the kitchen island, they found a cartridge on the floor consistent with 9mm ammunition. There was also a jacket on the kitchen table, which seemed an odd place for it to be. Upstairs, in the 12-year-old's bedroom, there was a green blanket on the floor with a sock underneath it. There was also some bunched up duct tape in the trash can. The boy had mentioned during his interview that his room was messy and that when he took his mother there, he started to clean up, though investigators would not have characterized the room as messy. Now, Michael himself appeared visibly shaken when telling his story to police. He ran through a myriad of emotions. He provided a detailed account of the evening's events. He explained the ongoing custody issues, how Svetlana had taken the children while he was in Florida, and how he had eventually been granted full custody, with Svetlana having only supervised visitation. He described returning home with Natalie after her charity function, finding the garage door unusually locked, and then Svetlana appeared and immediately attacked him with the taser. He recounted being bound with zip ties, being threatened with a gun, and Svetlana telling him she was going to shoot him because he made her life miserable. As I said, silly cow. Both Michael and his son had visible compression wounds to their ankles and wrists, consistent with having zip ties around these areas, corroborating their accounts. Now, when detectives attempted to interview Svetlana, she immediately invoked her right to an attorney. The detective, who was assigned as lead investigator, announced that the interview was being audio and video recorded. She was pulling loose hair out of her head and asked for a garbage can. She complained of having some pain and injuries, so it was decided to have her evaluated by medical personnel before any questions could be asked. She indicated she wanted her attorney. The detective then advised her of her constitutional rights. She again reaffirmed her desire for an attorney. No further questions were asked, and at some point she indicated she had fibromyalgia. Did I say that correctly? And had difficulty being in one position for too long. She was guarded by either an officer or detective at all times and was not cuffed. She was supplied with a blanket and allowed to lay on the floor if she wished. Now, Renton Regional Fire Authority personnel evaluated her. They determined there was no pressing injury that required further treatment. So while she remained silent, her 12-year-old son provided crucial testimony. Due to his age, child interview specialist Alyssa Lane from the King County's office was summoned to conduct the interview. The interview was audio and video recorded in the police department's interview room. The boy described the terrifying ordeal of being zip-tied by his mother, hearing the chaos downstairs, and then hearing the gunshot that killed his sister. His testimony provided critical details about the sequence of events and his mother's actions and statements throughout the incident. Detective Onishi was tasked with writing search warrants for both the Smithers Avenue residence and Svetlana's residence in Kent. He also wrote the probable cause document. And for him, at 1 a.m., December 19th, Edwards and the lead investigator returned to the Smithers Avenue house. Members of the Renton Police Department were on scene ready to conduct scene documentation. The investigators conducted a thorough walkthrough of the residence, documenting the layout and the evidence of what had transpired. The scene painted a clear picture of premeditation and methodical execution of a plan. At 2 a.m., the detectives proceeded to Svetlana's residence, which was also being subjected to a search warrant. In her upstairs office on her laptop computer, investigators found her will open to a page that listed 2 individuals as her power of attorneys. In the master bedroom, detectives found the receipt for the purchase of zip ties from Home Depot. Also recovered from her residence was evidence of her deteriorating mental state and her obsession with the custody battle. Now, on December 19th, the King County Medical Examiner's Office conducted the autopsy on Natalie. They took Natalie's cell phone and used her thumb to access the phone, then disabled the security to keep the phone from locking. The investigators observed part of the autopsy and were shown a bullet and jacket recovered from Natalie's skull. It appeared to be consistent with the 9mm ammunition. The autopsy confirmed what was evident at the scene. Natalie had been shot once in the head at close range. The bullet had entered between her eyebrows and remained lodged in her skull. There was no exit wound. The stippling and characteristics of the wound indicated a near-contact shot. Svetlana had pressed the gun directly against the daughter's forehead before pulling the trigger. Natalie's hands had been zip-tied behind her back and her ankles had been zip-tied together. She had been completely helpless when her mother executed her. Now, investigators interviewed several of Svetlana's friends and acquaintances, trying to understand what led up to this tragedy. Alison Nichols, who had worked with Svetlana at Boeing, had very kind words for her, describing her as a good supervisor who tried to protect her team. However, she noted that about a year after they had both moved to different sections of Boeing, she looked Svetlana up and called her. She said that the person she spoke to was very different. It was like she had no soul. She was quite cold. Another friend told investigators she had known Svetlana since the 1990s. She described her as a strong personality and being a little unstable when things were not going her way. She was very demanding, primarily of her family, for whom she had high expectations. Svetlana valued education highly. This friend noted that for the past year or two, Svetlana could not see her children. She also felt betrayed by the kids and felt that they should not have gone with Michael when he took them to Florida. She noticed years ago that Svetlana started to have medical problems, specifically mentioned fibromyalgia. She was in a lot of pain and missed work, and it was her observation that things started to unravel at that point. When asked if she was surprised by what happened, the friend indicated she was very surprised. She would not have been surprised if she had heard Svetlana herself deleted. She said that Svetlana takes stress very badly when things are not going her way. She further described Svetlana as a fighter who believes that persistence wins. In other words, she was a spoiled brat. So, January 3rd, 2019, the lead investigator attended the arraignment of Svetlana at the King County Courthouse. He attended with domestic violence advocate Darren Jamil, who was a Gulizia family friend. The certification for the determination of probable cause had been completed and forwarded to the prosecutor. Svetlana was charged with murder in the first degree for the killing of her daughter, and after a plea agreement where she pleaded guilty to all the charges as amended, her charges were changed to second-degree murder, second-degree attempted murder, and unlawful imprisonment. Svetlana was sentenced to 32 years in prison. According to the King County Senior Deputy Prosecutor, Don Raz, who was representing the state, this plea secured a conviction that cannot be appealed. He said at trial, a conviction is not guaranteed, so the plea guarantees she serves time and closed the case for the victims. On January 12, 2019, a service was held for Natalie Gulizia. The church was filled with family, friends, classmates, and community members, mourning the loss of a bright young girl whose life had been stolen by the person who should have protected her most. Natalie had been an active, engaged teenager. She was part of a charity club and had been attending a function in downtown Seattle. On the very evening she was killed. She was described by those who knew her as a great kid with a bright future ahead of her. The future was extinguished by a single gunshot by her own mother. And finally, the murder of Natalie. It was a tragedy, of course, but there was a whole bunch of toxic factors. The contentious custody battle, a mother's declining health, professional failures, medical issues, and an unwillingness to accept that Svetlana had lost control of her children's lives. She methodically, carefully planned this. She, of course, purchased the gun, took training on how to use the gun, she got zip ties, she amended her will, she called a friend in New York with what amounted to as a goodbye. And when she got to the residence, she hid her car nearby and waited with her weapons and restraints for the family to return. When Michael and Natalie came home that evening, she was ready. She tased Michael, bound him, zip-tied him, threatened to kill them, then went upstairs and with a single shot took her daughter's life. And the only thing that prevented more death that night was the malfunction of the gun. The malfunction gave Michael the opportunity to disarm her and fight back, saving his and his son's life. But for Natalie, there was no second chance. She died on the floor of her bedroom, bound and helpless, killed by the woman who gave her life. Now, some of you might say Svetlana was suffering from mental health issues and life stresses, and if you combine this with the divorce battle, it's going to drive her crazy. And in these situations, children are caught in the middle of their parents' conflicts. Natalie had her whole life ahead of her. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a student. But there's no excusing Svetlana's actions. I don't give a fuck if you were going through a divorce. I don't give a shit if you were feeling depressed. Nobody gives two fucks about your own personal situation because you don't do this. She made a choice that night, a choice to take her daughter's life, and it was a choice that's destroyed multiple lives. I can only imagine the trauma the 12-year-old boy went through. 32 years is not enough. When I read that, when I was doing the research for this, 32 years, I've slept longer than 32 years. And the chances are she probably won't get parole, but that's the very least punishment she should get. All she had to do was walk away, but she couldn't do it. On December the 17th, 2012, at approximately 12:30 a.m., Amanda Bacon and a companion, Frank Jones, took Amanda's infant son, Avery, to the emergency room at St. Anne's Hospital in Toledo, Ohio. Avery, who was 6 months old at the time, was not conscious. His head was swollen. He had purple spots behind his ears. His pupils were dilated, and his core body temperature was 93 degrees. Upon examination, ER doctors discovered that Avery's skull had been fractured. Amanda told medical personnel at St. Anne's that the child had fallen off the bed at her apartment. Where have I heard those porcupines before, eh? Police were called to the hospital to interview Amanda and Jones, who gave differing and, at times, conflicting accounts of how Avery was injured. You see, because St. Anne's Hospital was not equipped to handle Avery's injuries, he was transferred to St. Vincent Hospital. What does that mean? Not equipped to handle the injuries. Either the hospital is so bad or the injuries were that severe, eh? Amanda was taken to St. Vincent's in a police cruiser, where she and Jones were questioned by Toledo police detectives Ashley Nichols and Kermit Quinn. Based on the detectives' assessment of Amanda's conflicting statements and their belief that Jones' answers were evasive, both Amanda and Jones were taken to Toledo Police Headquarters for more extensive interviews. As I said earlier, porky pies. Amanda herself was interviewed multiple times by 3 different detectives over a 5.5 to 6 hour period. Jones was interviewed separately for a shorter period of time. Now, while Amanda was being interviewed, Avery was transported to Mott Children's Hospital, where he died on December the 18th, 2012. Now, regarding the mother Amanda herself, regarding her personal life, a witness in the trial said he knew Amanda, and guess what? She was known as a prostitute named Brittany. You dirty cow. And that he paid her $40 to $60 per hour for sexual encounters. Well, it beats minimum wage. The witness also testified that on December the 16th, 2012, he told Amanda he would pick her up at 9:30 p.m. When he eventually picked Amanda up at 10:40, she said her baby was sick, but it's nothing serious. The witness stated that he and Amanda went to a gas station for condoms and cigarettes, as you do. And as he gave his account of Amanda, another witness came forward and told police that he was also one of Amanda's clients and that he also knew her as Brittany. He said that he paid Amanda for sex on 2 occasions. However, when she texted him on December the 16th, 2012, he declined to meet her because he had no money. He also said that Amanda texted, "Sorry, my son is in bad shape right now. I'll text you back in a few." To which the witness responded, "I hope he's okay." He went on to testify that Amanda said, "I do not know. His head is starting to swell up and his ears are turning purple." Of course, these messages incriminate her. In the message, Amanda went on to say, "I left for 5 minutes and I don't know if my sister put her hands on him or what. I'm freaking out." The witness further testified that Amanda told him both of the baby's ears were blue and his head was kind of mushy. He said that Amanda refused his offer of a ride to the hospital. And on cross-examination, the witness testified that he did actually go to St. Vincent's Hospital after texting Amanda, and he saw her leave with police officers while he was sitting in his car in the parking lot. Now, to go into the trial a little bit more, the state presented testimony by physician Rachel Muchler. You see, Muchler testified that Avery's head was wider than normal when Amanda and Jones brought him to the hospital. She said that Amanda's pupils were smaller than normal for the dimly lit emergency room. Maybe she was on drugs, who knows? And that Amanda appeared nervous and was unable to provide Muchler with basic information such as Avery's weight and vaccinations. Muchler also said that at first Amanda said that Avery must have fallen off on the bed when she went into the bathroom. However, Amanda later stated she put Avery on the floor while she went to the bathroom and saw that his ears were bruised when she returned, as if some magical fairy came along and struck his ears. Muchler stated that Avery was not breathing according to an expected pattern and he was not awake. He also exhibited Battle's sign. This is a condition marked by bruising around the ears, which is usually associated with significant skull fractures. Now, Kevin Martin was also a physician and he testified that he was the emergency physician at the hospital at the time. When Amanda and Jones brought Avery into the hospital, Martin said that medical personnel were able to get Avery to breathe. However, the child's pupils were dilated and non-reactive to light and he was not moving. Also, the back of Avery's head felt like a wet sponge, causing Martin to consider child abuse as the cause of the injuries. Martin stated that Avery had a core temperature of 93 degrees, indicating that he was dying. He also suffered from acute blood loss and abnormal swelling of his head. Martin described Amanda as upset but not hysterical, like most mothers in similar situations. In fact, he stated that medical records where Avery was treated on September the 15th, 2012, showed that the child was treated for colic. This is an illness which usually causes a lot of crying in an infant. On cross-examination, Martin testified that all infants and young children have sutures in the skull that allow the brain to grow, as opposed to the type of fractures that Avery suffered. You also had a pediatric neurosurgeon in this case called Patrick McCormick, and he testified that an infant's brain has less water content than an adult's brain, making it more vulnerable to concussion injuries. He also testified that Battle's sign indicates high force to the skull that fractured the bottom of the skull, and it develops after a head injury occurs. McCormick said that there was no need for neurological intervention in Avery's case. because his injury was so severe that his deep brain structures had lost their function, making him essentially brain dead by the time he reached the hospital. My God, what did this woman do to him? McCormick also stated that Avery's coma was a 3 on the coma scale and that a normal score is 15. He stated that Avery's fractures look like an egg that is hit against a flat surface, kind of like puzzle pieces. Wow. And that the force necessary to produce such an injury was massive. He then demonstrated the type of force necessary to produce Avery's injury by using a doll. McCormick testified that Avery's injuries could not have resulted from hitting a coffee table or falling off a bed, or even from an adult smashing his body against a wall. However, it could have been made by swinging a child and causing him or her to fall hard on a flat surface such as a carpeted concrete floor. He further testified that Avery suffered axonal injuries, which indicated that his brain was moving when his head hit the surface, and that the impact caused a shearing force that broke the nerve axons and also caused hemorrhaging around his eyes. In fact, McCormick believed that if Avery's battle sign was first noticed at 10:30 p.m., then this injury would have occurred around an hour or two before. McCormick testified on cross-examination that he saw Avery at St. Vincent's Hospital, and he transferred the child to Ann Arbor at the family's request. However, it was obvious to him that the brain injuries were probably irreparable. Now, with all this evidence, prosecutors made the case in the trial and it lasted for around several days. They claimed that Amanda threw her 6-month-old son against a hard surface. This caused a severe skull fracture which led to his death 2 days later. After listening to 5 days of testimony and 3 days of deliberations, jurors found Amanda Bacon guilty of murder and child endangering charges. She was acquitted of aggravated murder. Amanda's defense team fought to poke holes in the state of Ohio's case, claiming the boy's death was at the hands of Amanda's roommate. Judge Frederick McDonald handed Amanda a life sentence with eligibility for parole after 15 years. What kind of mother was this? Silly cow. Thank you for watching.